Colonization never ended in the white supremacist system. And as we see today, the colonization is in the mind. Now, those who have been enslaved and those who have been colonized, we're still dealing with the remnants of that through the colonization of the mind. Pick up my book, 7 Steps to Decolonize the Mind, and we will help deprogram you from the colonization that was put upon you by generations and generations of white supremacy. You can pick it up today on Amazon.com.
The history of the kingdom of Dahomey spans 300 years, from around 1600 until 1904, with the rise of the kingdom of Dahomey as a major power on the Atlantic coast of modern-day Benin until French conquest. Situated in West Africa, the kingdom of Dahomey, or Abomey in its earliest years as it was referred to, was formed by a mixture of various local ethnic groups on the Abomey plain. The tribal groups, possibly forced to move due to the slave trade, coalesced around a highly centralized, strict military culture which was aimed at securing and eventually expanding the borders of the small kingdom. The kingdom became a major region power in the 1720s when it conquered the coastal kingdoms of Arada and Wida. With control over these key coastal cities, Dahomey became a major center in the Atlantic slave trade until 1852, when the British imposed a naval blockade to stop the trade. War with the French began in 1892, and the French took over the kingdom of Dahomey in 1894. The throne was vacated by the French in 1900. But the royal families and the key administrative positions of the administration continued to a large impact in the politics of the French administration and the post-independence Republic of Dahomey, which later renamed Benin in 1975. Historiography of the kingdom has had a significant impact on work far beyond African history, and the history of the kingdom forms the backdrop for a number of novels and plays. Prior to the centralization of the kingdom of Dahomey, the evidence suggests that the Abomey Plateau was settled by a number of small tribes, commonly known as the Gedevi. However, because of lack of resource and access of the key trade routes in the region, the plateau was very poor compared to the surrounding areas. To the east of the Abomey Plateau, the oil empire in present-day Nigeria was at the peak of its power and exercised some hegemony over the tribes in the area. To the south, there were two prominent kingdoms, Arada and the Wida, which had power along the Atlantic coast. The coastal area had come in contact with the Portuguese in the 15th century, but significant trade did not start until 1533, when the Portuguese and the city of Grand Popo signed a trade agreement. There are a number of different folk stories about the founding of the kingdom of Dahomey. Most scholars believe many of these stories were created or exaggerated in the 18th century to promote the legitimacy of the Dahomey royal regime at the time, and thus may be based only loosely on actual events. The most common founding myth traces the establishment of the kingdom of the royal lineage of Alada. According to this story, there was a fawn prince named Agassi in the city of Tado who tried to become king but lost the struggle and took over the city of Alada instead. Around 1602, in some versions, 3 princes Agassu's lineage fought over who would be the ruler of Alada. It was decided that both princes would leave the town and found new kingdoms, with Tiembanin going south and founding the city that would become Porto Novo, and Do Adaklins moving to the Abomey Plateau to the north, Porto Novo and the kingdom of Dahomey remained rival for much of history. Though Adeklin's son, Dakodonu, was granted permission to settle in the area by the Gedevi chiefs in Abomey. However, when Dakodonu requested additional land from prominent chief named Dan, the relationship grew hostile. The chief responded to Dakodonu with sarcasm. "Should I open up my belly and build you a house in it?" Dakodonu killed Dan on the spot and ordered that his new palace be built on the site and derivative the kingdom's name from the incident. The empire was established in about 1600 by the Foni people who had recently settled in the area, or were possibly a result of intermarriages between the Aja people and the Gedevi. The palace in Abomey was established in the early 17th century. The foundation king of the kingdom of Dahomey is often considered Hwebanja, who built with the royal palaces of Abomey and began raiding and taking over towns outside of the Abomey plateau. At the same time, the slave trade began increasing in size in the coastal region through the kingdom of Waida and Arada, and trade with the Portuguese, Dutches, and the British. The Dahomey kingdom became known to European traders at this time as a major source of slaves in the slave trade at Alada and Waida. King Agaja, grandson of Hwebanja, came to the throne in 1718 and began significant expansion of the kingdom of Dahomey. By 1720, King Agaja repudiated the kingdom's allegiance to Alada and began increasing military activity throughout the region. In 1724, Agaja offered his military to help with succession struggles with Arada. However, he returned his forces on the army of Arada and took over the city, relocating his capital from Abomey to Alada. In 1727, Agaja took over the city of Waida and thus became the primary force on a major part of the coast. In 1729, Agaja began a war against the Oyo Empire with a number of cross-border raids. During the war, the royal family of Waida returned to the throne, forcing Agaja to fight to reclaim the city. He moved much of his army with a significant portion in the back composed of women dressed like male warriors. This is possibly the beginning of the Dahomey Amazons. The Waida royal family had assumed that the Dahomey army had been weakened in the war with Oyo, and upon seeing such a large force, fled from the city. In 1730, the war with Oyo ended and Dahomey detained domestic control, but became a tributary of the Oyo Empire. By the end of the Agaja's regime, the kingdom of Dahomey occupied significant areas, particularly the crucial coastal slave trade cities. At the same time, Agaja created much of the administrative apparatus of the kingdom and instituted the key ceremony of the annual customs. Following the death of Agaja in 1740, the empire was defined by significant political struggle, although limited largely within the press walls, and deepening engagement with the slave trade. There was significant succession fights after Agaja's death when the recognized heir was passed over for Tagbesu, who ruled from 1740 to 1774. Tebesu moved the capital city back to Abomey, but had to deal with a number of different factions in the powerful members of the kingdom and in the keeping conquered territories royal. At the same time, the empire continued slave raids throughout the region and became a major supplier to the Atlantic slave trade. In the late 18th century, Oyo put pressure onto Dahomey to reduce its participation in the slave trade, largely to protect its own slave trade, and Dahomey complied by limiting some of the slave trade. However, even with this, the empire was a significant player in the slave trade, supplying up to 20% of the total slave trade and providing the largest portion of revenue for the king. In 1818, King Gezo, who reigned between 1818 and 1858, came to the throne by forcibly replacing his older brother Adandozan. Crucial in Gezo's rise to power was the financial and military assistance of the Francisco Felix de Sousa, a prominent Brazilian slave trader located in Wydad. As a result, Gezo named de Sousa the Chacha or Viceroy of Trade in Wydad, providing him with significantly more power and money. The title Chacha remains an important honorary position in Wydad to this day. In 1823, Gezo led armies against Oyo and was this time able to end the tributary status of Dahomey and permanently weakened Oyo. Two major changes occurred in 1840s and 1850s, which significantly altered politics in Dahomey. First, the British, who had been a major purchaser of slaves, began taking an active stance in the abolishing the slave trade in 1830s. They sent multiple diplomatic parties to Gezo to try and convince him to end Dahomey's participation in the trade. All of these were rebuffed, with Gezo worried of the political consequences of ending such trade. Second, the city of Abeokuta was founded in 1825 and rose to prominence as a safe haven for people to be safe from slave raids by Dahomey. In 1844, Dahomey and Abeokuta went to war, and Abeokuta was victorious. Other violences in the early 1850s further cemented Abeokuta's challenge to Dahomey's economic control in the region. Internally, the pressure resulted in a number of changes. Gezo rejected British requests to ending of the slave trade, but at the same time, the palm oil trade as an economic alternative began to expand significantly. Politically, the debate became centered on two political fictions and factions: the elephant and the fly. The elephant connected with Gezo, highly profile political leader, and Criollo slave trader like the family of de Sousa, pushed for continued activity in the slave trade and resistance to British pressure. The fly faction, in contrast, was a loose collection of palm oil producers and some chieftains, which supported accommodation with Abeokuta and the British in order to expand palm oil trade. At the policy and war debates held at the annual customs, these two factions held a number of tense discussions about the future of the kingdom of Dahomey. In 1851 to 1852, the British imposed a naval blockade on the port of Dahomey in order to force them to end the slave trade. In January 1852, Gezo accepted the treaty with the British ending the export of slaves from Dahomey. In the same year and the following one, Gezo suspended large-scale military campaigns and human sacrifice in the kingdom. However, political pressure contributed to the resumption of slave trading and large-scale military actions in 1857 and 1858. Gezo was assassinated by a sniper associated with Abeokuta, and large-scale warfare between the two states resumed in 1864. This one ended again in favor of Abeokuta, and the result was that the slave trade could not be significantly re-established to its 1850 level. The power of slave traders in the empire decreased, and the palm oil trade became a more significant part of the economy. Dahomey's control of key coastal cities continued and made the area a crucial location in the European scramble for Africa. In 1878, The Kingdom of Dahomey agreed to the French making the city of Cotonou into a protectorate, although taxation of the King of Dahomey was the remain in effect. In 1883, the French received similar concessions over Porto Novo, a traditional rival of Dahomey along the coast. In 1889, King Glere died and his son, Behanzin, came to power and immediately became quite hostile to the French in negotiations. Behanzin renounced the treaty with France, providing them with the city of Cotonou, and began raiding the possessions. The hostility hit a high point when Behanzin began conducting slave raids in French protectorates along the coast, namely Grand Popo in 1891. That year, the French military decided that a military takeover was the only solution and placed General Alfred Almedi Dodds in charge of the operation to commence in 1892. The Franco-Dahomeyan War lasted from 1892 until January in 1894, when Dodds captured the city of Abomey in January 15th and King Behanzin on January 25th. Notable during the war was the defeat of the Dahomey Amazons in November 1892. Dodds named Agori Abo the new king of Dahomey, largely because he was seen as the most malleable of the alternatives, and exiled Behanzin to French possessions in the Caribbean. The French began changing key aspects of administration and politics in the Kingdom of Dahomey. In 1899, the French instituted a new poll tax which was highly unpopular, and Agoli Abo opposed the tax, causing serious political problems in the protectorate. As a result, on February the 17th, 1900, the French deposed Agori Abo and ended the Kingdom of Dahomey. The French, though, brought together many key members of the kingdom as the chiefs of cantons. French Dahomey included the Kingdom of Dahomey, with Porto Novo and the area to the north of loose tribal control. Agori Abo remained exiled from 1900 until 1910, when the French administration decided to allow him to return to the area because of his key role in the Fon ancestral worship and ceremonies. He was not allowed to reside in Abomey or travel freely, but was allowed to visit Abomey to perform ceremonial functions during the annual customs of the French administration. The French Dahomey administration remained in the area from 1900 until 1960, when the country gained independence and took the name the Republic of Dahomey. In 1975, the name of the country was changed from the Republic of Dahomey to Benin. The King of Dahomey remained an important ceremonial position and continued through both French administration and independence. Since 2000, there has been a struggle over the position with Agori Abo III and Houdon Behanzin holding rival claims to the throne. The political and economic hierarchies of Dahomey have remained crucial in post-independence Dahomey and Benin. One of the key leaders in a group of men holding power which dominated politics in the country from 1960 until 1972 was Justin Ahomejen Tomentin, twice the head of state of the country, who garnered significant political power through his connection to the royal lineage of Dahomey. The descendants of Francisco Felix de Sousa remain very important political leaders in Benin to this day, including Colonel Paulo Emile de Souza, Benin head of state, who was the Benin head of state in 1969 to 1970. Isidora de Sousa was the president of the National Assembly of Benin in 1990 and 1991, and others. Kojo Tovaru Honono, who claimed to be a prince of Dahomey but had lived most of his life in France, became a major critic of the French colonial empire and founded the Ligue Universelle pour la Défense de la... It's a French thing, and I'm not a French speaker, but something like that, which was to recognize the Africans as full citizens of the French state. Now, let me take back the question that we started with. Is the history of the Dahomey Kingdom still important? Please come and let me know what you think in the comment section. My name is Osie The Born Child, and thank you so much for watching the African Diaspora News channel. And until next time, I'll be seeing you, dear brothers and sisters, in another video. Bye.